Good morning, Social Media Breakfast, Madison. We are so glad to have you with us today. It is Wednesday, September 15th, and it's a little chilly out, but we're so happy to have you with us this morning. I want to go ahead and let's just jump right into it this morning. Again, like I said, we're so glad to have you with us. If you've never been with us for an event before, you should know that we are all about education and networking. We meet the third Wednesday of each month virtually until we can be together again. You should please connect with us on all of the social medias. We are on all of them, of course, because we're Social Media Breakfast. Also, please join in the conversation this morning using the hashtag using the hashtag SMBMad. Apologies, I have too many screens open this morning. Also, if you'd like to have a scholarship for a class or a conference or something, I know right now with the pandemic, maybe not a lot of those things are happening, but some are. Please get in touch with us. We'd love to help make that happen for you if we can. This is our board. These are the wonderful people that I have the opportunity of working with on a regular basis. They are wonderful. They work very hard behind the scenes to make these events happen and to pull all of this together. And so, yeah, I'm so grateful to work with them, and here they are. Next month, our event next month that we are very excited about, October 20th, the 4 elements of great storytelling. This is going to be with the head of marketing from Contently. So this is going to be a good one. Mark your calendars for that. As I said, it's the third Wednesday. And you'll hear more about that on our channels in the weeks to come. So if you'd like to get involved with our organization again, as I've said, or as we've said, with the pandemic, right now things look very different for all of us still, but we are continuing to seek out good speakers, team members, volunteers. We're looking for organizations to be nonprofit spotlights. So if you have an interest in any of those things listed on the screen, please, please, please get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. And also, please join our Facebook group if you haven't already. Simply search in the search bar, click in the search bar of Facebook, look for Social Media Madison Masterminds. It's quite a mouthful, but look for us. Join the group. We love to have you as a part of it. Basically, every week there's new conversations that are happening about social media related things. You can ask questions, you can network and meet people in a virtual space. It's a closed group, but just simply request to join and we'll be glad to add you. It's a great place to be. We highly recommend it. I want to say thank you to our sponsors this morning, without which we could not do this. We are able to bring you these events, whether virtual or hopefully again in person someday, free of charge because of our amazing sponsors listed here. These are wonderful organizations in our community. And I'm going to, first and foremost, I'm going to introduce to you one of our sponsors this morning. We have a representative here from Dreambank. My friend Andy is going to tell you a little bit about Dreambank. So good morning, Andy.
Good morning, David. Thank you for that, and I'm excited to be here. As always, my name is Andy Friske. I'm a senior dream curator at Dreambank. I'd like to welcome all the first-time viewers here today, especially those who aren't familiar with Dreambank. So a little bit of context as to who we are. Dreambank is a free community resource that is located in the heart of Madison, Wisconsin, and we're put on by American Family Insurance. The whole reason why we exist is to help inspire people to pursue their dreams. And in large part, that's done through the programs that we offer. So we have 9 distinct event series, anything ranging from small business management and entrepreneurial workshops, which David has spoken in before. We also have career-related activities, family events, events in Spanish, really trying to cover the gamut and appeal to as many different dreamers as possible. One thing I wanted to highlight in particular is our upcoming Dream Summit. So this will be the 3rd annual Dream Summit taking place October 6th and 7th. And what it is, it's 2 days of motivational keynotes and inspirational workshops where you're able to virtually meet like-minded attendees and speakers and explore your dreams and how to achieve them. So just to rattle off a few of the star-studded lineup here, we have Tan France, Glennon Doyle, Drew and Jonathan Scott, Chef Jeff Henderson, Natalie Nixon, Daniel Pink, Kristen Hadid, Dr. Alex G, just to name a few. So I will go ahead and drop a link in the chat so you folks can go ahead and check that out. Free of charge to register. Again, October 6th and 7th, would love to see you there. And with that, I will kick it back to David.
Thank you so much, Andy. And when you said star-studded lineup, you were not kidding. So very, very exciting. Thank you so much for being here. Another one of our sponsors that I want to highlight this morning is our friends at Powder Keg. If you haven't heard of Powder Keg, you should. They are a custom website design firm, been a part of our community for quite a long time. They also built our beautiful website at smbmad.org. And if you have any needs in that space, please reach out to them, powderkegdesign.com, and you can get some more information about all of the wonderful services that they offer and the great things that they're doing in our community. We are very grateful for them and their longtime partnership. I also want to take a moment today. Every month we love to, we have a nonprofit spotlight. We want to shine light on the good that's being done in our community because there's a lot of it. And so each month we like to essentially celebrate a local nonprofit. And this month we are excited to tell you just briefly about Goodman Community Center, who is currently existing to strengthen lives and secure futures throughout the greater Madison area. They are located in the heart of Madison's Atwood neighborhood. They offer programs for preschoolers through teenagers, families, individuals, and older adults as well. They have on-site childcare services, including fully licensed and accredited preschool, 4K and elementary after-school programs, and a teen center that offers after-school activities and even employment opportunities. Their food pantry serves more than 200 households a week and is open on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays. They also offer meals, social activities, and health and wellness opportunities for seniors. So most of their programs are completely free or they're priced to be very, very affordable, including access to their fitness center, catering services, and their community spaces. So lastly, every year in November, Goodman hosts their Thanksgiving Basket Drive when they collect donations to provide thousands of Dane County families with everything they need to make a Thanksgiving meal at home. So you should definitely, all their information is on the screen. You should stay up to date with what's happening by following them on social media. Check out their website. They're doing a lot of good in our community, and we couldn't be more grateful to be able to spotlight them this month. All right, so why you came, here we are. I am excited for this morning, the main event, and to sort of dive in into what's happening here this morning with our influencer panel. So I am going to invite my fellow panelists to join me on the screen this morning, and I'm gonna get into an introduction with each of them. Good morning, friends. So good to see each of you. I'm going to switch decks here this morning, but before we really dive in to our content this morning, I want to take a brief minute and give each of you a chance to introduce yourselves before we get started, and what your connection is to influencer marketing. How did you get started? Why are you here, essentially? So I'll start with I'll go ahead and let Kyla start, and then we'll kick it around. So Kyla, good morning, and tell me a little bit about your connection to influencer marketing.
Good morning. I'm working on my cup of coffee right now. Okay, so I've been influencing technically since 2019, if you want to check my taxes. I came into a history of it through blogging, writing, social media management, and marketing. I have a BBA in marketing from UW-Milwaukee, and my intention was to be a stay-at-home mom, but I shelved that and became a work plus stay-at-home mom because that sounded more fun. And so I started with my own personal blog and Etsy in 2014, and I grew then my local connections with Madison Mom's blog and other in-print and online publications, and also started social media management at that time, which was that also included PR management of influencers. So my start is in the back end of influencing. And after enough time doing the back end, I was encouraged to try out the front end. So in 2019, I became a full-time influencer. And now that is what I do.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. Alicia.
All right, good morning, everyone. So my name is Alicia Hazen, and I'm otherwise known as Madtown Momma on social media. Like Kyla, I'm considered an influencer, or in my case, a micro-influencer, just based on the size of my following. And I also used to write for Madison Mom's blog, and so that was my introduction into the blogging world, where I learned a lot about kind of how to run a blog And that inspired me to launch my own. So also in 2019, I launched my own blog, madtownmomma.com. And I would say my social media and my social media following really just started to take off during the pandemic, which was a little unexpected. But I think just with everyone being home and looking for things to do, it really started to grow. And so I started modeling for some local boutiques like Z Boutique and Details Boutique. And that kind of got my name and my face out there in a different way as well. And things just kind of took off from there. And so I really started influencing, I would say, as kind of a part-time career at the end of last year. And so, you know, kind of landing my first contract and whatnot. And so I just do this in my spare time. I do work full-time at the university as well. So this is what I would consider a side hustle. So yeah, that's my story.
Great. Thank you, Alicia. All right, Julia, good morning. Tell us about yourself.
Good morning. I'm Julia. I work for Hilldale, an outdoor shopping center on the west side of Madison. Hopefully you all can check us out. And also I'll follow us on Instagram at Hilldale Madison. So I'm the marketing manager and I have the privilege of running our social media accounts. And this means I get to work with influencers and be on the other side of it and line up amazing partnerships that can highlight Hilldale and advocate for our business. And it's been great, and it's just something really fun, and it's a great way to connect with the community. So I'm excited to be here today to talk about it.
Great. Thank you so much, all of you. And then my name is David Clark-Sally. I'm on the board of Social Media Breakfast, and I am here this morning to moderate this conversation, but also as an influencer myself. So I'm really fortunate. Similar to what Alicia has shared and what Kyla has shared, it kind of started, maybe not necessarily intentionally. I kind of fell into it. And I'm really grateful for the opportunities that I've had to work with some really great local brands and larger brands, and just the experience that I've had, which I know we're going to get into. I'm excited to share that with all of you this morning. We're going to kind of come at this from the perspective of, obviously, we have myself and Kyla and Alicia, we're coming at this from one side of the things. And then we have Julia here, who's representing really her experience managing influencers and working on the other side of this. But I'm really excited for us to share our experiences with you this morning on how you can engage with influencers. And so I think that's kind of where it makes the most sense to start, at least with. I'd love to sort of engage or start with engaging Julia on just saying, talk a little bit about, from your perspective, why even is this something that you should do? Why influencers?
Yeah, definitely. I would say this is a new and emerging marketing technique. It's been around for quite a few years, but now it's so much more streamlined. Instagram and Facebook are on our side to work with influencers. They make it very easy for a business to work with an influencer, to track, the advantages, the metrics that you're getting, and just to see how your customers are engaging with it. So it's a very measurable marketing technique, which is what we love as a business. And I particularly love it because it gives someone else a chance to advocate for Hilldale, to be a voice for Hilldale, and to represent us. They can be in front of the camera, they can take over our Instagram, they can provide us with content that we can repost versus like having to post a stock image. And it's just a great way to have a local connection. Like I mentioned earlier, we primarily work with local influencers, so they have a great community following. They're usually already fans or customers at Hilldale. So we love that they advocate for us and speak to their audiences about us. And they're just a great ambassador. Like despite like what contract you have or what you're working with them on, they are a great ambassador for your brand. It's just a great lasting partnership, and just adds an awesome local connection. So we've been very grateful for those partnerships that we've been able to do the last few years.
Yeah, and you said something, when we were talking about this panel and we were putting all this together, you said something that really stuck out to me. You said, from your end of things, you said one of the reasons that you love it is it gets someone else in front of the camera, right? You had said, well, this is an ironic statement given that you're on camera this morning, but you had said that's not your favorite thing, right? And so as someone who works in marketing and works with a business, it gives you the opportunity to step back and let someone else get in front of the camera who doesn't mind that. So I feel like, when we're talking this morning to likely a lot of like local business owners and people who work with marketing in a marketing sphere of their company or whatever, who might be interested in this, that's an advantage that you might not even be thinking of. You don't have to be in front of the camera, let someone else do it, right? Which I think is really great. Also, I meant to say this up top. If you haven't been to an event before, please leave your questions as we're talking this morning in the comments. This morning we are tracking those behind the scenes, and at the end of our panel discussion this morning, we're going to get to some of those questions. So I didn't want to forget to mention that as well if you have anything while we're going. Okay, great. So thank you for sharing that, Julia. So that sort of gives you just sort of a little bit of a sense of why might we want to do this. But then let's talk about I'm going to put it over to Kyla. Why we talked about why we would do it, have an influencer, but what can an influencer do for you? Like, let's talk about some of the things that influencers can do for you as a business owner.
Of course. So, I mean, while the influencer industry might seem new or unprofessional to some people still, it is one of the top growing advertising outlets.
Yeah.
It is predicted to reach 13.8 billion this year. And so businesses are catching on, big and small, that influencer marketing does indeed work.
Right.
And so I wrote a couple of things that I want to make sure that I touch on. Instead of a company hiring out an ad agency for a photographer and models and staging for the product, they effectively get all of that in one person. And so it's budget conscious for the brand, and it more or less just makes sense. And then including all of the content creation work, they also provide you with the platform. So you can find influencers who then have the direct audience that you're trying to reach. Say you're trying to reach Wisconsin moms, and then you can find an influencer who's already doing that.
Right.
And so influencer marketing works so well because they're already a trusted source to their audience. And so if you work with an influencer, they're recommending your product to their followers, which are highly targeted and understood by the influencer. Yep. You can utilize influencer marketing to reach that targeted audience for more than just products, which I know is a different kind of concept, especially if you're new to influencer marketing.
Totally.
An example is the Department of Health Services. They have implemented influencer marketing to discuss current health issues affecting their different areas. And so if they can find influencers with a strong local following, they can reach their messages to convey those different things. Other areas where you could do it would be tourist boards. They can hire influencers to drive traffic to specific regions. They can also support and drive excitement for launches of businesses and products, such as a store grand opening, or just inviting influencers to attend special events for coverage to their audiences. And I know that Alicia and David have some good examples if you guys want to share them.
Yeah, for sure. And before we do that too, I want to touch on something you said, Kyla, which I think is really important. And I know we're going to get into this a little bit later too, but just the idea of you sort of briefly mentioned, but there's a lot of different things that that you can do. It doesn't just have to be, I think when people hear influencer marketing, think, holding a product, right, in a photo. It doesn't just have to be that. And so we're going to get into that. But I think you touched on that, and that's an important thing to call out. The other thing I was going to say too, which I think we can all speak to a little bit, is just that trust aspect too, right? I think the thing that influencers offer for your business is like that trust with their audience, right? That you don't have as a brand, as a business, is you don't have or haven't gained maybe yet that trust with the audience that they have, right? And so utilizing them gives you the opportunity to tap into that trust and have them sort of represent something. So yeah, so Alicia, why don't you give an example of something that you've done recently in terms of this space? I'm curious to hear.
Yeah, sure. So one of my kind of biggest contracts to date was actually a partnership that I did with a national furniture store. They were opening a new store here in Wisconsin and really wanted to use influencers to kind of generate some excitement about the grand opening, to help promote the event that they were having, which was kind of a 2-day grand opening event with lots of promotions and specials and whatnot. They actually wanted us to be in the store, during the grand opening event, generating excitement there, sharing on social media. and just kind of, showing off the store to our following. And I think that really worked very well for them. And so they hired, I think, about 5 local influencers from throughout Wisconsin. So I actually, drove about 2 hours to the store in order to do this. But what they did then afterwards was they had each of us kind of pick a room in our home to style with furniture from the store so that we could show before and after pictures to our following, to just provide some inspiration of like, hey, if you've never shopped here before, like these are some of the items that I found at the grand opening event. Here's how I've styled them in my home. So it was kind of the before and after in terms of how they used influencers for that particular grand opening. So on the front end, really just, generating excitement, promoting the event, getting the word out to people in the community. And then after the fact, kind of providing that inspiration of like, here's how I use some of their items in my home. So it was really fun.
Yeah, not only fun, but too, I think we'll probably keep hitting on this point over and over again, but a very creative way to use an influencer too, right? That's something that's I think really important for all of us to not only to talk about, but to also share with all of you this morning is some creative ways and ideas that you could work with an influencer that might be outside of the box. For example, I've worked with an agency that on several different campaigns that are cause-based, which is very interesting and sometimes harder to generate visual content for, but again, I think it speaks back to that trust piece of things, right? I've worked with this agency to do campaigns to help drive awareness or conversation around like really big issues such as voting. They did one on about police brutality, lowering drug prices, which is a very different kind of a conversation and a very different kind of a way to engage your audience, but also to use an influencer. I don't think that people would necessarily think about. So just the wanting to continue to drive this point home of be creative, right? Be creative in how you're using influencers and don't, think outside the box. So with that said too, I guess I feel like we've tried here to sort of set the stage for, why this is a good idea for you, but Alicia, tell us a little bit about, let's talk a little bit about how you would even go about finding someone to work with.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the case of the furniture store that I just mentioned, their influencer marketing coordinator actually shared with us how she found each of the influencers that they used for that campaign, which she said geotagging was really, really helpful in that instance, so that she was trying to figure out like who's even close to this grand opening store that might, be willing or able to participate. And so I always tag my posts, Madison, Wisconsin, just so that, anybody who is looking for influencers in Madison, Wisconsin can more easily identify who some of those folks might be. And so that's how she found us. But then also hashtags, of course, are a good way to find, people within the niche that you're trying to reach or the target audience that you're trying to reach. So like mine is kind of Midwest lifestyle, motherhood, and fashion. And I've really emphasized small, local, and women-owned businesses throughout Wisconsin, in particular here in the Madison area. And so I have, a series that I do every week called Madtown Mondays. And so I have that hashtag that I tag every single Monday post on that's featuring a different local business, and so people can search, the Madtown Mondays, or when I expanded into a partnership with Travel Wisconsin this summer, where they were trying to promote tourism throughout Wisconsin, I added a Wisco Wednesdays feature that kind of highlighted businesses outside of Madison or fun things to do in Wisconsin. And so searching some of those like types of hashtags, like mine are pretty specialized, right? So you would need to know mine. But if you're looking for bloggers in Wisconsin or Madison or the Midwest, searching some of those hashtags, Wisconsin blogger, Madison blogger, Midwest blogger, or like Kyla mentioned, Madison moms, trying to figure out maybe who some of those folks are. So I think geotagging and hashtagging are really good ways. And then I would say also, like follow the folks that you're interested in potentially working with and get a feel for their accounts.
Yeah.
So that you kind of know like what their style is, what their brand is, how they engage with people. And then you can, kind of reach out from there.
Yeah, of course. And I think that's really good. You mentioned, as a business, determining what the right niche is that fits your brand, right? So for you have a very specific niche. Not every brand is probably going to make sense to work with you, right? That's just the way that it is. Similarly, I think my niche, is geared definitely towards lifestyle content, especially as it relates to parenting, LGBTQ issues. I love, working with brands that appreciate all of the things about me and about what I share on social, and who invite, the fullness of my life and my family and my experiences into the relationship. So I think, again, I'm not the right fit for everybody either. Kyla, talk a little bit about your niche and how you feel like that fits into some of the partnerships that you've had.
I'm heavily parenting or family focused. If you can tell, it's very enmeshed in my life.
Yeah.
And I touch on all of the topics encompassing that. And so you find a lot of like family recipes, how to dress as a mom. And my primary demographic is Wisconsin moms first, and then Midwestern moms after that. But any topic surrounding motherhood is basically what I'm working on.
Right. Yeah. And I think too, so all that to say is, Julia, tell us a little bit about, from the brand perspective, you're also looking for people who who are the right fit for Hilldale, right? But what are some of the like practical things that you do when you're looking for influencers?
Yeah, definitely. So we're lucky enough to have influencers or social media partners who reach out to us and want to work with us. So that makes it easy to find them. So then you do your homework, you scroll their feed, you look back. You don't just look at like the last, week or month. You look back, you watch stories, you look at their followers, see what images they're tagged in, and do your homework that way. Or you notice an influencer or someone on social media who you're like, this person is on it. They're great. Like, I want them to be the voice for Hilldale. I would love to work with them. And then you kind of just strike up a conversation and again, do your homework, check to make sure that, their voice aligns with you, that they post consistently, they're in Wisconsin or in Madison, Wisconsin, if that's just the area you're trying to target, and just like the things that they advocate for, their voice, and just like how authentic they are. You want to make sure that, it's not going to come off as, they're just working with you one time and that's it. So you kind of take all of those steps and look at each individual person and then decide like if it's a good fit, if you want to try it out. And maybe they have other accounts or other posts that you can look at for reference and see how those did. And that's another great way to find an influencer.
Yeah, and talk to me about that metrics piece, right? So I think there's a lot. We are one subset of this conversation. We could have this exact conversation with a different group of people, or we could watch a different what I'm trying to say is that you could get a different answer from a different group of people, right? But for this conversation and in our context here, talk to me about metrics and how important it is to when you're looking for an influencer, their numbers, their following, how do you factor that into your decision making when you want to work with someone?
Yeah, I would say it's a huge piece of the decision. Obviously, these partnerships are going to be part of your marketing plan for the year.
Yeah.
And maybe you're taking away time or budget from another initiative like print advertising or some sort of other form of advertising. So you definitely want to make sure you're going to get your return on investment. So we will look at, like I said, how many followers they have, how many likes they have, and just like how they're growing. I like to look back and, scroll down and see, 3 months ago, how many people liked a post versus today, and just know that like they're gathering more people and that they are growing. And then I like to look at the comment section and see like how people respond to their posts and see how excited they get, see if they engage and ask questions.
Yeah.
And those sort of the things that we look at and that we find very valuable.
So what I'm hearing you say is it's not just about numbers in terms of following. it's also about the bigger picture. In a perfect world, right? In a perfect world, you have somebody who does have, you know, a decent following, but who is just as importantly, who is engaged with their audience, who actually has a connection with the people that are following them. And it's not just a post, but there's actually, they're commenting, they're asking questions, there's some engagement there. You're also looking at that, and that's just as important to you, right?
Definitely. It's such a great point, because that overall follower number can really not be the best storyteller. Like,
Yeah.
I like to look at each individual post and see how
Mhm.
those are being engaged with. And that's where I get my most information.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, Alicia, you talked about this earlier, the idea of, you know, or the concept, the term of micro influencer. There's a lot of research to show that micro influencers actually have a much better connection with their audience than macro influencers, because they're still, they have a nice size following, but it's still small enough that there's a really direct connection to the people that they're following. I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, Alicia, but like, can you talk about like just the connection that you have with your audience and how that has played into some of the partnerships that you've had? Do you feel like that you have seen people come away from maybe some of the things you've shared about other partnerships that you've had and been like, I tried that, I did that, and how do you feel like that plays into like the trust piece of things with your audience?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think sometimes, especially for early influencers, which I would still maybe consider myself in that realm, it's hard not to get into the numbers game, right? And focus on like, why is this account growing so fast and mine is not, right? And I don't have enough followers to have, you know, these partnerships that I'm looking for. And it's simply not true. And I think it's more about engagement. And, you know, I have a pretty high engagement rate, and that's because my audience trusts me. I have a pretty small local following in terms of when you compare like big, large national accounts, it might be a little bit harder to figure out how that fits into a local plan. But you know, I think part of it is like sharing how I share. You know, I'm pretty authentic and honest in how I communicate about like things going on in my personal life, how I'm feeling about, you know, things going on in society as well. And so I think that helps to establish trust. But then like Julia said, like, you know, I always engage with my followers. So if they're commenting on something, I'm always commenting back. So I'm always responding to my DMs. I think when you have, like you said, a smaller number, it's easier to keep track of things, right? And to respond to all of those when this is perhaps a part-time thing and not a full-time job. And so that has really helped with engagement. And I think that, you know, the more consistently you show up, the more people are apt to pay attention to what you're doing and saying. And so far, you know, it's worked well for me. Like, would I like higher numbers? Sure. Because, you know, who doesn't get into that numbers game? But I would rather keep a really engaged, like a highly engaged following and a smaller one at that than to grow really large and then feel like I've lost that connection to my audience. Or like I don't have time to keep up with comments or something like that.
Yeah, Kyla, too, I want to ask from your perspective, this is not something that is necessarily on our outline, but we're sort of going here. So I'm curious from your perspective with, you know, we're talking about numbers, we're talking about what's been your experience, both, you know, you mentioned, you know, you sort of worked on the back end previously before you started actually doing it yourself, but like, you know, what's your perspective on numbers, right? Like if people are looking for influencers, you know, I think that, you know, as we've established, the tendency is to go where the highest follower count is. But, you know, talk to me about your perspective on, you know, numbers and engagement, and is that really the best way to go about it? How do you balance all of that when you're looking for somebody to work with?
I feel like you touched on that pretty accurately, where those newer to influencer marketing and implementing influencer marketing might get drawn in by the follower numbers still, thinking that that's how many people they're going to reach. In reality, that's not always the case. And it's very true that micro and nano influencers, they have that direct targeted audience. And so if you're able to be efficient, they cost less money to hire and they are reaching your audience in a way more genuine way.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think too, I think we've driven that point home, but I think it's just a really important one to make because if you're looking at the overall, the big picture, which we're going to get to here in just a second with Julia, but there is, I think if you look at the bigger picture, a lot of times engagement rates are a lot higher for folks that have, you know, a smaller following than folks that have a bigger following. So I guess it depends on ultimately what's important to you. But if I think, you know, we're trying to sort of make the point here that it's not all about numbers when you're looking to work with someone. So, okay, so let's talk about like making a plan. Julia, I know you've done this, and I know, you know, how does this work with your overarching plan for marketing?
Yeah, definitely. So once you've found your influencer, you've aligned with who you want to work with, then you need to line it up. So either you reach out directly and just kind of like gauge their interests, or you have a campaign ready to go and you present them kind of with an offer. So it just kind of is where you're at, if you're ready to make that like big leap, or if you're just kind of dipping your toe in. For us, most of the time we're ready to, you know, we've got something coming up, we have an event or a store opening, and we are ready to push that message out there. So we usually make like a marketing plan or a media kit to present an influencer to. So we give the ins and outs about Hilldale, about the brand or the business that we're promoting or the event, and what we're looking for from the campaign, whether it's like just a couple story slides on Instagram or a featured post on Instagram, Facebook, their blog, Pinterest, etc. So you kind of need to make the plan and figure out where you want your message pushed out there and what you're looking to get back from it, and trying to iron out all of those details. So you get those ready, and then you set a budget, and that conversation can go, you know, a couple ways. You can have a budget that you're working with, or you could put it out there and say, like, what is your going rate, or what is your, you know, normal cost for something like this? And you kind of take those pieces and then you work with the influencer on lining up the actual campaign, or maybe it's a longer term contract.
Yeah. And I think that's tell me just a little bit about that too, because we've talked about this a lot in our planning of this morning too, just like how this fits into like a longer term thing. So I know that there's nothing wrong with just doing like a one-off, right? Like, oh, I want to work with this person, and then it, you know, one and done. But it also, I think it's really smart to, if you're looking to work with an influencer or multiple influencers, to make a long-term plan, right? And to think about how that fits into maybe your year versus, you know, just doing it once. So in terms of long-term plans, you talked about budgeting, but then, you know, can you tell me a little bit too about like, you know, considering like the different platforms, how do you know where to put them? You know, like how do you fit that into everything?
Yeah, definitely. I would say for us, we think about the message that we're trying to get out there, or the campaign that we're trying to push, or the promotion, and where that audience lives. So maybe probably each of us who run a social media account know like our audience on Facebook might be a little bit different than our audience on Instagram or our website, or even like our email list. So kind of figuring out what audience you're trying to reach is how we determine like what platform we want to be on. And then we look at how we're trying to get that message across. If we want to try something new and different, and maybe have an influencer take over our Instagram feed and show whatever the initiative is from their perspective, and just give that real world experience for a customer to see. So those sort of things are really fun, and just kind of playing around with it and just seeing what kind of campaigns you could put together, and then just going from there.
Yeah, trying something different, basically. And you also, I think you've said one of the things that you've sort of alluded to over and over again, which I think is really key, that we should sort of point out, is essentially you as the marketing person or the business owner, whomever this is that we're talking to, or whoever you are that's listening. It's important to do a lot of listening on social media, right? So in order to find these people that you want to work with, so you're not just I think that's a huge part of this, is that you are you're paying attention, right, to who's following you, who you're following, and you're actually not only just doing your research, but you're just observing, right? You're listening, you're paying attention to who's there, who's engaging on your stuff. And there is something to be said for just sort of paying attention to what's already right in front of you, right? And I hope that as social media people in the world and in our community that we're already doing that, whether we're using influencers or not, because that's a huge part of a good social media strategy. But certainly when you're looking to work with an influencer, that's hyper ultra important, right? That you're actually paying attention to your feed and to the people that are engaging with you, because that kind of will give you a sense of like, oh, who might I want to work with, right?
Definitely. I would totally agree with that. You've got to take the time and spend like looking at your metrics, looking at your engagement, seeing who your followers are. Like I said, Instagram and Facebook have made it so much easier to manage your social media business. And maybe you look at your metrics and you see that the bulk of your followers are from this area of Central Wisconsin or in this age group, and you're trying to reach something else. Or someone else. So then you find an influencer who has that audience already, and you guys can bridge that gap together.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious too. I want to hear just briefly from Alicia and Kyla your perspective on this, but I know, we talk a lot about metrics, and I know that Instagram and Facebook, that these platforms make it easy to track metrics, certainly. But in my experience, especially with the campaigns that I've done as of late, I don't find that those platforms really love it when I do ads. It feels as though, and I think there's some research to back this up, that they don't want my ads to do well ultimately, because they're not making money off of my ad, right? So tell me a little bit, because I think this is important for businesses to hear this as well. Because if you were to look at my page and you were to really do a deep dive into my page, you would see that a non-ad post on my page tends to do better. And I think that could be discouraging to businesses looking to hire influencers, because if you were to compare those, you would see, oh man, this one didn't get as much attention or likes as maybe this one did on the surface. But that doesn't necessarily, I think part of that is the platform, part of that is just sort of the way that the system is set up, not to necessarily work for us, but kind of against us. So Kyla and Alicia, can you talk a little bit to your experiences with ads versus non-ads and the numbers game there? Because it's hard, right?
It is, and it's totally true what you're saying. I feel like, I don't feel like, it's very factually true that as soon as you disclose, so every influencer is required to follow FTC compliance, which means that if you're getting paid or there's a trade of value, you have to disclose that is going on, usually with a hashtag ad plus branded content. And so as soon as that is registered in Instagram or Facebook or anywhere, it's going to underperform, not only because audiences are more or less usually likely to scan through it, but like Instagram just prohibits it because they want to entice businesses to also boost the ad post.
Alicia, I see you nodding your head and rolling your eyes, talk to me about your experience with that.
100%. It is true, and it is frustrating, and I have had this happen many of times, including this week, so when I look at like my average likes and comments, it's generally over, 100. So 126, I think, is like the average. I posted a paid partnership branded post yesterday, like 40, 45 likes. And the reach is so much less. And that's the thing that's the most frustrating, is when I look at, okay, like likes and comments aside, because we know that that's not always, painting a full picture. But when I look at reach in comparison to other posts, it's just so much less than what I get when I'm not, tagging an ad. And so I think to me, it's really a balance. And so I try to be very conscious of how often I'm posting branded content. you know, and
Yeah.
I certainly don't want to seem like a walking advertisement where that's all
Of
I'm
course.
doing on Instagram or Facebook, but, you know, balancing it out, because I obviously have contractual obligations to fulfill too with my partners. And so, you know, no more than like 2 per week, because I really
Mhm.
see like how that dramatically impacts, you know, my reach and
Yeah.
engagement. And I do
Yeah.
think it's not my audience who's just saying like, oh, I don't want to
No.
look at this.
Yeah.
It's Instagram is showing it to, you know, so many fewer people than a
Yeah.
typical post, that, and there's no way around it. We can try every trick in the book
Yep.
and it doesn't seem to make a difference. So I
Right.
think you're right. It's something to just be aware of. And it is
Yeah.
definitely not a reflection of the influencer. It's a reflection of the industry that we're working within when it comes
100%.
to the platforms that we have to share these on.
Yeah. And okay, so here's why I call this out, friends, because this could feel like a wet blanket on top of a really positive conversation of we're trying to tell you why you should work with influencers. But here's why I call this out. A couple things. Number one, I call this out because I want it to be clear to brands and businesses that might want to work with influencers that this is normal, right? It's normal. It's happening to all of us. There's, you know, this is just a part of it. It's not a reflection on you as a brand, or even necessarily a reflection on the influencer. It's really a reflection on the, like Alicia said, the industry. And also, Kyla pointed this out, and this is 100% true, that these platforms want your money, right? So if you're not boosting the post or giving them money, you're using an influencer, that's not necessarily benefiting them, right? So they don't have any essentially any incentive to help that do well. So I'm sharing that for number one to say, like, this is normal. Expect this when you're working with influencers, and expect this when you're looking for influencers, right? Don't necessarily hold that against them. I also say that for a second reason too, just for the general public, as a general PSA, I know that a lot of folks might find ads or sponsored posts to be annoying, or like, oh, that again. But if you love supporting local, please support your local influencers. A like, a comment, a share, those things. I know that that's like perhaps seems really ridiculous, but it's helpful. It's helpful to these people. It's helpful to these folks right here on this call, and to plenty of other people who are trying to, you know, make a few bucks as a side hustle, as a full-time job, wherever that falls. Your engagement with those posts is actually super helpful. So if they do pop up in your feed, do whatever you can to support them still, right? Because the fact that they're there in your feed is a miracle in and of itself, that the algorithm allowed it to show up in your feed. But also, lastly, the other thing I want to say on that topic before we move on to, and I want to ask Julia this question. So we've all sort of been like, yes, nodding our heads, rolling our eyes, you know, like, oh, this is a pain. Why do you still want to do it, Julia? Why do you still want to work with an influencer, even though you know that sort of the system or the industry is kind of like working against us in a way? Like, why would you still do it?
Yeah, I would say the biggest reason for us is it gives a local voice and a local connection to our brand or to what we're trying to promote. And it just gives that authentic content. Like I said, you know, versus having to share like a stock image or something provided that just doesn't have that personal touch.
Mm-hmm.
I've just learned, and I've seen, and the metrics back it up, that our followers would rather see a real person. Maybe it's someone they know, or maybe it's someone they know through a channel. So, you know, they like to see that. And it just switches up what you see on social media. You know, sometimes it can get boggled down with, you know, negativity or just irrelevant things. So to have a local person in your community with their voice, maybe they're taking over your Instagram, or they're, you know, have an event that they're hosting on your behalf. It's just something that just brightens it up. And I would say there's, you know, 2 ways to work with an influencer, whether it's they just post your content on their feed, or they provide photos or like an Instagram takeover and do it on the business's side. So that might be a way around if you're playing around, and, you know, an Instagram isn't on your side and the influencer's ad is maybe getting buried. Have them take over your feed and post on, you know, your page. And it just, I think it'll have a really good result.
Yeah, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll just simply ask the question. I think I know the answer, but so even with all of this information, are you saying that you still feel like this is a thing that is worth looking into and worth the time, even with, knowing all of these factors?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
I would say as social media just like becomes so much more top of mind, and there are other platforms like TikTok is
Mhm.
coming in there. Not only does it make my life easier because someone is taking over social media that day, but like I said, it just gives that little something extra, and it's just a great way
Yeah.
to get your brand out there.
Yeah. So, okay. So all of that said, kind of so many things that we've said, so many things that we've talked about, why do you want an influencer? How do you find an influencer? We've talked about essentially some of the pitfalls and the challenges, making a plan. But I want to just sort of talk just briefly about setting expectations, which we've kind of touched on a little bit, but I want to be super explicit about this because this has been a pain point in my experience as an influencer. And I know we've talked about this, Alicia and Kyla, as well. So feel free to jump in while I'm talking if I miss something. But setting clear expectations is a great just like life sort of motto, but also specifically in this conversation, if you're wanting to work with an influencer, clear expectations is a must. And honestly, if you can and you have the capacity to do so, doing that in the form of a written agreement is best and easiest. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can simply be a one pager or a half a pager where you essentially set out your sort of expectations for the partnership and both parties sign it. It's just clear and it's makes everything easier for everyone. Because here's the thing, your lack of clarity is going to cause great frustration for you because you're not going to get what you want ultimately, but it's also going to cause great frustration for the influencer because essentially they're not going to know what you want either. So when I talk about clear expectations, some of the things that I think are really important to include in an agreement or in these conversations, things as specific or as granular as what you want them to wear or not wear. I've had many, and this is very common, agreements where, they want you to wear something that's plain, right? That doesn't have a logo or another brand on it, right? Totally common, totally fine. But you need to make that clear, right? Other things like, maybe you want to make sure that it's clear that you want them to keep the post up, don't archive it, it needs to stay up, or maybe we need to put the dates in, right? That's huge. Like, when do I need this by? When do we want this to go live? Do you need to pre-approve it before they post it on their page? Do you want to see it first? Do you want to have the opportunity to add in any edits or anything like that? Or are you fine if they just post it, right? That needs to be super clear. Are there any non-competes? I've worked with brands before where they said, for the next 3 months, we don't want you to work with another soap brand or whatever, right? Are those kinds of things important to you? Julia mentioned this earlier, but including any sort of like creative brief or anything, any prompts, is there a certain CTA that you want the influencer to use? Are there any links that you need them to put in their bio or to swipe up on Instagram? Which platforms do you want them to post this on? I think it's also important, Kyla mentioned this, if this is really huge, adhering to FTC guidelines. A quick Google search will give you a lot more information than what I'm going to get into right now, but technically you are supposed to have influencers include hashtag ad, hashtag sponsored. If there's any sort of value, that's technically legally what you're supposed to be doing. And then also the most obvious thing to put in writing and to have the conversation about ahead of time is, what's the value here, right? Or am I just simply paying you? Is there cash here? Like I'm giving you a cash payment, or is the value in form of a trade? Am I giving you gift cards? Am I giving you a product that's worth something to you? Am I giving you an experience, right? Is the value here that you're providing something for me based on an experience? And here's the thing to know about all of this. These things are all really important to put into writing and to have the conversation about upfront, but people can say no. Influencers can say no, and just keep that in mind, right? That's okay. And honestly, probably best that you expect that certain people will say no. And negotiating is a part of the process. I know that could sound maybe a little overwhelming or like, oh, I don't want to negotiate. But if you are interested in getting to the space, I think you need to expect that there may be people who are like, that doesn't really work for me right now. Or, hey, how about this? And that's okay. That's a normal part of this process, and expect it and be okay with that, right? But I think the clearer you can be with your expectations about what you want, the better the experience is going to be. And the more likely you are to get content and an outcome that you really desire, right? And so if you're not getting what you want from an influencer, chances are you're not being clear enough about what your expectations are, quite frankly, because we're doing our best, they're doing their best, and they've got a lot going on too. So if you keep getting something back that's not what you want, chances are 9 times out of 10 that maybe you need to be clear about what your expectations are. So I just wanted to make that really, really, really clear. And also just sort of say, like, I think if you can put something in writing, it's best that you do. That way it's just all sort of laid out there very clearly. So any additions to that, any horror stories or anything that you, either Alicia or Kyla, you want to share about experiences with brands not being clear, or anything that you want to add that I didn't say in regards to setting clear expectations?
I feel like you hit the nail on the head. I think that it helps both the influencer and the brand really understand what they're going after. It makes it easier to work for everyone, and makes it more likely that you get the results that you want. And
yeah, and I would just add, like, going back to that concept of creating a relationship, is I always ask for feedback after a campaign. Like, is this what you were looking for? How did you feel about it? Is there something that you would have liked me to do differently? Just so that I'm learning, and making sure that, my client is satisfied, and then they have an opportunity to share if something, maybe they would have preferred something different. That hasn't happened yet, but, I like to ask, just because, like you said, this is a reflection of our own personal brand too. We put a lot of work into, maintaining our feed and into, our campaigns. It is work, it's fun. And it's also, it takes time and it takes energy, and we want to make sure that we're doing things really well. I did have a kind of brand new small local company who had never worked with influencers before, and they kind of asked me, what should my expectations be? Like, what is reasonable for me to ask for? And so we kind of worked together to shape an agreement that worked for both parties. And so I think that's completely reasonable too. It's just have a conversation, shape something together, and make sure that everybody understands what the expectations are up front.
I think that's a really good point too, Alicia, that most influencers are happy to work with new people to influencing, and especially if they've done work before, they're happy to educate you and figure out what's normal. And it's a back and forth conversation, open conversation.
100%. No, I think that's such a good point. And two, Kyla, you said this earlier too. I know that from a brand perspective or business perspective, if you're looking to work with an influencer, you're obviously putting you're putting resources into this relationship. But it's important to remember, and I think Kyla, you said this earlier, that what you're asking for is also a lot. People see ads and things on social and they think, oh, that again. But like, you have no idea what goes into that behind the scenes from the person who has kids or is trying to prepare meals and do this and get people to here and there and all the things, and also take good photos and like do what it's a lot of work that goes into crafting copy and taking photos and editing and all of that. So also just keep that in mind too, is like, your clear expectations are also respecting the fact that this is a legitimate business and a legitimate opportunity for a lot of folks who are, also trying to sort of make things happen on their end too. So that's also just a respect thing, is setting those expectations. Okay, so we're about out of time. Please get your questions in if you have any last minute questions, because we're going to address those in like a hot second. But before we get to questions, in a very quick, succinct minute each, I would love for each of you to just give me a really quick, like really wonderful success story, whatever success means to you. I want to end on a really high note before we get to questions. So again, succinct. Julia, we'll start with you. Tell me a success story that you've had in this space.
Yeah, so I'll give a quick example. Last year in December, Hilldale was really close to hitting 10K followers, 10,000 followers. And like all of a sudden, I decided I really, really want to hit this goal by the end of the year. And I was doing like 12 days of holiday giveaways. I was hustling on my own and I was freaking out. I was like, it was a goal I set for myself. So, anyways, I reached out to a few influencers, including Alicia, Madtown Momma, just in a pinch. I was like, can you host a giveaway on your page and have the contest rules be follow you, follow Hilldale, and you get a chance to win? And I was able to reach out to influencers that we had worked with throughout the year. Like I said, they're ambassadors for us and they will do anything for us in a pinch. And we hit 10,000 followers by the end of the year. And I would not have been able to do that without those partnerships and that just like quick willingness to like jump in and do a giveaway for Hilldale. So that was just an awesome experience last year.
Thank you. All right, Alicia, quick, a good success story that you've had.
I would say one success story I had is that I like to do like fundraisers or drives on behalf of local organizations in partnership with different businesses in Madison. And one that worked really well was the first one that I ever did with Loft out in Middleton. We planned a book drive for Madison Reading Project. And, you know, it was the first time they had done it and first time I had done it. So we really had no idea how things were going to go. And we wound up collecting 150 books to donate to MRP.
Yay.
So it was really nice. And it drove traffic to the store. So the store was really happy. So I just think that that was like a feel-good moment where it was an opportunity to give back to the community too, while also kind of building that goodwill with the organization.
That's wonderful. All right, Kayla, good success story.
Okay, this one was harder for me. So I feel like I have like a brand success story and then a me success story.
Yeah.
The one that was really fun for me and my family was partnering with Walmart last year for Christmas. It was like a surprise partnership. So we didn't know the products that we were going to get, and it involved like truckloads of Christmas trees coming to our house, and it was like a Christmas constantly trying to like unwrap it, and the kids got a huge kick out of it. So it's always fun when I can involve the kids and they get excited.
Yeah.
And then brand success stories. I recently partnered with Mix Fitness when they launched they have like a Peloton type of bike. And I gave them whitelisting permission, which is a way to work with influencers on a more deep level. And the success that they found from whitelisting my image led to over 23,000 clicks to purchase, which was a huge number for me. So
yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. Thank you all for sharing. Okay, so we're going to get to questions. There's been a lot of questions, just so you know. So we're not going to get to all of them because of just time and logistics. So if we don't answer your question, please reach out to any of us. We would be happy to answer a question that you have. I'm speaking for the rest of these folks because I think that they're fine with that and they're lovely humans. So I don't imagine they would have any issue with that. But if we don't get to your question, please feel free to reach out to one of us or also reach out to Social Media Breakfast directly and they'll get your questions to us. But I just want you to know we're not going to get to all of these because there's a lot, which is great because it means this is a conversation that folks are interested in. So I'm going to throw out some questions. Anybody can jump on them if you have an answer, but we're going to try to get through a handful of these relatively quickly without talking too much. So this question is specifically for Julia. This comes from Soraya. Also, apologies if I mispronounce names. I'm really, really sorry. I'll try not to. But if someone was, this is just a hypothetical, but if someone was contacting you, wanting to work with you, do you ask them to provide anything? Or if you know, like any, like, and what would that be?
Yeah, so if it's someone I've never heard of, or maybe don't have the time to like invest in looking through their page as much, I would ask them if they had something like a media kit or references or examples. And most of the time they've got that ready to go and ready to send it. So I think it's a very fair question to ask, and they can usually provide you with that. Or you can just kind of snoop around, stalk their page a little bit and see if right off the bat if it is what you're looking for or not.
Yeah, and so if folks don't know what a media kit is, essentially that is a document that most influencers who have been doing this have, which is basically kind of like a 1 or 2 pager that has kind of like our stats, and like a lot of times it has like a rate card where like there's information about like just kind of like a brief snapshot of who we are and what we're looking for. And that gives you some really good information on the person if you don't know of them. So Emily asked the question, which I think we sort of talked about, but I just want to call this out. They asked the question, you know, understanding the importance of influencer marketing, but working for a nonprofit, and how hard that is when there's a smaller budget, and asking about the best approach. I think we kind of touched on this, but just so you know, Emily, you don't just have to offer money. Again, not all influencers are into this, but there are many who are. If you can provide an experience or a gift card or something of value to them that may not be money, there's a good chance, Emily, that you can still find someone that wants to work with you, that doesn't just need or want money. So I think we touched on that, but I wanted to specifically call that out. Zachary,
can I piggyback on that real quick?
Yeah, please. 100%. Yes.
Oh, okay. So if you're working with a nonprofit or if it's a charitable thing, just keeping that open communication and driving that point home. Oftentimes, like if I'm doing this full time, I'm going to come out with my rates, but I personally keep like a discounted rate for certain amounts of charitable work or nonprofit. And so if it aligns, I mean, like there's no harm in trying to figure out something that works for both of you.
Yeah. And you know, as you touched on this before, and we've said this several times, is that, you know, there's nothing wrong with asking the question, right? You have nothing to lose in asking the question, right? So think about what you have to offer, what you can reasonably offer, and then offer it. And if someone says no, they say no. But you've not lost anything in that. So Zachary is asking the question. I don't have a lot of experience with this personally, but maybe one of you do. The difference between working with an influencer on a contract basis versus like affiliate marketing and earning a percentage of a sale, and is one better than the other? Do any of you have experiences with affiliate marketing? I don't do much of that myself.
I've done both. I don't want to jump on Alicia's toes. Personally, for nano and micro, I've never found much interest in pursuing only affiliate marketing, because for me as a content creator, my position there is that I'm putting in the work on the front end. I would like to be compensated for that work. But there's times when affiliate marketing does work. Like say I bought a product and I want to recommend it, then I'll do affiliate marketing. And I know that it is a case-by-case scenario for everyone who and what they prefer. But for me as a content creator, I prefer compensation over affiliate.
Yeah.
Alicia, do you have any?
Yep, I would absolutely agree with Kyla. I think that affiliate marketing is hard. I think that you don't see a huge return on investment. And so if I'm putting in the work, just like she said, I would rather be compensated for that work upfront than, you know, hopefully earning a percentage of, you know, sales down the road.
That's a really good point to make, is the return on investment. And so the number of eyes seeing all of the work that we're putting out there, it might not be their direct time to purchase, but say when they need to make that purchase in 3 months, when there's not a trackable link where we would get credit, they're going to say, oh, Kyla shared that and I want to get it, but there's no way to track that or for me to be compensated for it.
Right, 100%. And I think too, just with regards to that though, I will say there is, again, nothing wrong with asking, right? If you want to ask an influencer if they're comfortable with that, as long as it's clear what you're offering and what the expectations are, and if they're okay with it, then, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think from our perspective, and that's part of the reason why I don't do it, is because I don't, again, similar to what they've said, I don't really feel like that there's usually the return on investment from the influencer side of things. There's a question, we've thrown this around a lot. Amy is asking the question about the difference between macro and micro influencers, which is fair because we never really defined that. But essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially micro influencer is it's a size thing. So it's usually on the smaller end of things. Macro is like 100,000 or more. You know, those are bigger, much bigger influencers. Micro and nano are smaller influencers. So, I mean, again, a quick Google search, you can sort of see how that's defined, but essentially we never really defined that and we threw that around a lot. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful. I'm looking at some of these other questions. So many great questions, many of which we did address. So probably some of these came through before we got to some of these points. Let's see. Sorry, I should have, I wasn't reading these ahead of time. Oh, okay, so this is good. From Megan, this is a question for probably Alicia or Kyla, and I think I probably know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyways. As an influencer, how do you balance multiple social platforms and keep up with all the changing trends? For example, TikTok, the fact that Reels are such a big thing on Instagram and everyone's wanting to do Reels. Like, how do you keep up with that? And yeah, what's your perspective on that? Any thoughts?
I mean, I feel like it's kind of like any industry or job. It might be a little bit more fast paced with learning how to keep up with things, but it's a learning curve that you keep up with. And also, I think that there's a lot of value in going deep instead of going wide. So once you find what you're good at and what you're connecting with your audience with, that's where you focus.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say pick a couple and focus on that. You can't do it all, right? And so, and I would say you can't do it all well. And so for me, right. I have, my Instagram set up so that it cross promotes to my Facebook page. So it kind of takes the guesswork out of it there, but I still have to go to my Facebook page to engage, with the comments that are happening there as well. I have not even downloaded TikTok, so I haven't dabbled in that yet at all, because I know for me, to manage a full-time job and parenting and running a blog, I can really only do a couple of things well. And so I would rather focus on that. And like you said, take a deeper dive into those things and keep up with those changing trends than to try to do everything that's out there. I just can't.
It's a great rule of thumb, across the board, I think, is, Kyle said, do what you're good at, right? Like really focus on what you're good at. And if you want to try something new, that's okay. But, don't stress yourself out trying to do all the things well, because that's just not going to happen. And that's the case for you as an influencer, but also that's the case for a brand, right? Like, if you're looking for something specific, find someone in that specific space, find someone who's really good on TikTok, because that might be very different than someone who has a really good really great Instagram content. Those are very different things. I'm curious if anybody has any thoughts on this. This is a great question. I don't really have an answer to, but maybe somebody has some thoughts on it. Just a couple more questions and then we're going to wrap. Carrie is asking about how do you protect privacy, especially like, if brands are like reposting things. I know part of that, plays into putting that into the agreement or the expectations of we're going to reshare or we're not or whatever. But Kyla, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. Well, first off, if brands are sharing anything, it's going to be shared through contract. If anyone is sharing anything without my permission, I don't handle that very well.
Right, of course.
And then also, I feel like a part of influencing, what you're signing on for. There's like a lack of boundary there. Obviously, I have my baby right here.
Right.
And so you're held to a certain personal standard that I feel like isn't found in really any other career.
True.
Where people do get to know the inner workings of your life way more. But as far as that, you think about your boundaries before you sign on, really, or at least I do. And so I'm Madison area. I don't share my exact location. And I share my kids' names. That's something that my husband and I discussed ahead of time. Totally. And so, I mean, I feel like some people can do influencing without disclosing those things. For me, I can't with my brand, but yeah.
No, that's fair. And I think essentially, that's sort of the name of the game for a lot of influencers. And so they've already thought about that, but that's just a conversation you should have, right? And with an influencer that you want to work with, is ask them those questions. Again, include those things in any agreement. If you want to reuse their content, make sure that that's clear that you're going to repost their content, or that you want to, at least, so that all of those conversations are had up front. I think that we're gonna leave it there, because there's so many questions. There's no way we can get to all of them. But thank you all so much for joining us this morning. Like I said, please feel free to reach out further to any of each of us individually if you have questions specifically. Reach out to Social Media Breakfast if you have questions, and we can get them to the right people. But just thank you so much for joining us this morning for this conversation. Thank you to Julia. Thank you to Alicia. Thank you to Kyla. And thank you to all of you for watching. This has been a really, really great, fun conversation. I hope you've gotten something out of it. And please join us next month as we talk all about storytelling. And for that, with that, I'm going to leave you all with that. So have a wonderful morning, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much.